Hey YouTube, how you doing? It's Max. In this video, I wanted to talk a little bit about the SPERM principle, which I know has a funny word, is a funny word, but it's an acronym that means social, political, economic, religious, and military. And I found this term through, I guess, just researching world building over the years. I mostly find a lot of my content here on YouTube, different videos and different channels, and there's been a lot of concepts that I've seen, and a lot of them just goes in one ear out the other ear. But some techniques do stick with me, and this one stuck with me in particular. And I think that it's uh, it's really good for both storytelling if you're focused on writing and you want to flesh out your settings, or if you're dungeon master in D&D or other tabletop games. And I think for me specifically, um, dungeon mastering and playing D&D has really helped me come up with a lot of these interesting, I guess you could say, like, tools for the utility kit when it comes to world building. I think it's just something interesting, like being able to create your world and then you're kind of presenting it. It's kind of like giving an elevator pitch, but interactive elevator pitch when you're actually DMing for real people in real time, and they're throwing curveballs at you, and you're trying to improvise. And something with like just you write something, you give it to someone to read at a later date. Sometimes I feel like when I've done that, and people give me feedback, it's usually always positive stuff. And while I enjoy positive stuff, I feel like it doesn't really help me grow as a creative sometimes. So I guess that's why I'm just talking a little bit about D&D. You can kind of see if something works in real time or if something doesn't work. Um, and that's really been beneficial, I think. So these people who are making D&D content videos, if you're interested in world building, I think that they're a great resource, because you can sort of see these tactics that really force you to look at your story from the eyes of the audience in new ways. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Anyways, I'm getting a bit off topic. This video um, is inspired by another video by Dale Kingsmill, who has a YouTube channel called Monarch's Factory. And I'll put a link in the description, but this is a concept that I haven't really like. Maybe I've heard of it before. I think she says in her video that she learned about it in high school. I feel like I would have remembered the sperm principle being like told to me in high school, but I guess 4 years later it still resonates with me. Anyways, yeah, her video will be in the description. I think she goes into more detail about how it's impacted her campaign and how she uses it in her campaign. Whereas this is just kind of like a general video about it because I think it's an interesting topic that I wanted to make a video about. So anyways, yeah, the SPERM principle, I think I said before, is an acronym, stands for social, political, economic, religious, and military. And I think the purpose of this, at least in my perspective, the purpose is to sort of have this mental checklist when you're crafting your societies. And there are, different theories about like what are the pillars of a society. And I think this one, it's just five. It keeps it simple. And I think when you're trying to translate information from your mind to the audience, I think keeping it simple is usually the best route, because people are going not going to retain all the information anyway. So if you can formalize it in some way, so keeping it with like five, I think that's the easiest. And I think that this pretty much covers everything. Whereas if you are to remove any of these from your society, they would definitely leave a gap in it. So, like for example, if you didn't have a military force in your society, and later on in the story there's like some threat to the society, and you forgot to include a military source. Sometimes if that's not, kind of said in advance, and it's very obvious that it wasn't thought of, it can kind of lead to plot holes or this idea of taking away from the verisimilitude of the story. And I think probably said this in past videos of world building, and I'll probably make another video about verisimilitude in the future. But I think that's like a golden rule for me with world building, and that's another word that I kind of learned from a YouTuber, I think Matt Colville, who does D&D videos as well. Another great channel. I'll try and figure out what video he talks about that in, and maybe make a video about that in the future. But that's for another time. Anyways, I'll get into these five kind of concepts. So with social, I think of social as this concept that equates to more like the fun aspect of what the denizens of a society do. So like what do they do in their free time? What kind of unites them as a community, as a society in certain ways. So like this could be anything from for activities of fun, thinking about like in our lives, we go to bars sometimes on the weekends, we go to restaurants, just things that you might kind of go spend money on, interact and socialize with other people, maybe invite your friends or family to go do. Typically outside of your house, I would say. So like just activities in like maybe there's like special events going on at the park. You could go to the park. Um, you could go to like amusement parks. You could go to festivals like music festivals or concerts. You could go to watch sports at sports games. I think all that kind of encompasses like the social element of your world. And I think that like for example, I think a good one is sports, because that also kind of allows different societies you make to kind of have a similar connection. So like if there's X amount of sports teams, let's say like 8 sports teams in your region, that kind of unites all 8 of those societies under a certain activity, which could be, what you define that society as, whereas other societies don't play that sport. So that could be a good way to kind of unite different societies if you don't want to go a political or religious route. I think that from like a plot perspective, you could have this social structure. It's kind of like a place where the protagonist of your story can like go to relax or learn information about the region that they're currently in. It's a good place to set up like quests. So if there's like a quest board with people who are looking for work, they might post it at one of these social venues, and your protagonist can learn about the quest that way. Because sometimes it could be a little bit like jarring to have these new people who just enter the society, and right off the bat they like meet the mayor of town who trusts them with these problems instead of having a system uh, in place already. So I think that just having these social kind of features are a good way to attract the reader into enjoying this society. Um, but yeah, pretty much just keeping the tone casual, keeping it comfortable at the beginning, and then you can kind of slowly escalate or increase the tensions, escalate the tensions, stuff like that. But yeah, I think especially if you're role playing, I think that having these social kind of components really helps promote role playing if you're doing a tabletop like D&D. Maybe if you're writing not so much, but still, I think that's a good place for like kind of banter, kind of low key conversations, etc. Then we go into political. So political, this is really who's influencing the town, who's making the laws, all that stuff. In the USA, we have local government, we got a state government, we got a federal government. So you can kind of play with those dynamics if you want. You can kind of have like, if you're starting at like a small place, you can have like the local government. But if you're kind of looking at your world from like a more macro perspective, you can kind of see how the state or federal governments kind of relate to one another. If you're doing like a small town, typically the go-to is just to make like one town hall building that represents the political authority of the town. You could have this kind of tie into the other pillars. So for social, you could do like maybe like the sports team of the town is like the most important like thing in the town. So like the person who owns the sports team gets to call the shots and has a lot of power and influence. You could have, I didn't mention this in social, but kind of tied to like taverns and inns, you could go to like a almost like a casino or mob boss kind of thing. Like if you have like a Las Vegas kind of like, or like underground kind of black market kind of person, I guess, for social, like kind of like where all the like the crime people kind of go to like get jobs and whatever. Whoever the boss is of that could be a leading figure. You could do kind of like an economic institution, like a Jeff Bezos or Mark Zuckerberg, or like just anyone who owns a very prominent company that is critical to the society's success. You could do like a religious leader, like the Pope or an Archbishop, or even like a military leader, like a general, or maybe a pirate king or a commandant or something like that. Just anyone who kind of makes the rules, makes the laws of the society that you're kind of creating. I think the tone for political figures should kind of be like they have a goal in mind. So it could be like a noble goal, like they're just trying to keep the town intact and prosperous. Or it could be another goal, such as like if it's a town leader who really wants a seat in the city, they're trying to do, cut corners and do all these things just to make themselves either get like reelected or elected at a higher position. So, kind of focusing on what the goals of the political leader are. And I think that the political uh, leader, whoever it is, whether it's a good goal or bad goal, it should be they should be very adamant in that goal, so not like super wishy-washy. Like I don't think that the protagonist can just come in and like dissuade them from their goal. I think that they're just gonna be like a constant, like static character, if you will, not really dynamic in any way. So I think that because like I think that a political leader just is so ambitious in their seat that they just aren't going to be they're just going to be like an immovable object, which could really either be an ally or an alliance ship with the protagonist of the story, or they could be like a kind of an enemy. But I don't think they should be set up as a villain unless it's like a complete, like, the protagonist wants to get a seat of power or something, and it's like the same goal in a competitive context with whoever the political leader is, or if the leader is just doing something like that seems terrible, like they want to, oppress certain people, and the protagonists are like, we got to stop that, then, obviously I think that's a good reason for the political person to be an antagonist. But I think it should kind of almost be like a rival or something like that, relationship at the beginning, and then you kind of see where it goes, and it could be good, it could be bad. Ultimately, with all the political like jargon and stuff, I think it's probably good to not flesh that out too much unless that's something you're really passionate in, but more keeping that as like Easter eggs and lore. I don't think that that should be central to the plot, because I feel like a lot of people, unless it's the specific vibe you're going for, to have a lot of dry political nonsense. I think that most people kind of find that boring, so trying to keep that kind of as digestible as possible is probably always good. And I think that if you're kind of like someone who is you like nervous, like what if I'm gonna get like checked by some person who's like gonna be like, oh well, you didn't think about this in your political system. I think just like kind of keeping it kind of almost you don't even really want like you making it very just kind of like you don't you if you're trying to present it in a way to the audience, make it so the audience doesn't even want to like delve into it in a way, just to like kind of further dissuade them from the just the complicated slow moving processes. And you can just keep like iterating, like, oh, if they have a question about something, be like, oh, I've got to talk to my supervisor who's got to talk to his supervisor, kind of thing, if that makes sense. Just keeping it very like um just slow moving, I guess, and having, I guess, pawns of the political system be the ones that socialize with the protagonist, so that if those questions come up, you can just use the pawns, like, oh, I don't really know, that's above my pay grade response. Anyway, um, going into economic, I think this is what gives the society its power overall. I think this is one of the most important things to sort of like kind of understand and get a grasp on. So pretty much just how does the society like produce goods or services? that are in high demand, which keeps them relevant, or if they are unable to do this, why they are irrelevant to the rest of the region that they're inhabiting. So, like any friendly relationships with any trade partners, or I think are pretty key for having a powerful society. So, if they aren't able to have trade partners, then that's kind of a red flag. Maybe this shouldn't be a super well developed place that's able to get spices from across the world, if that makes sense. So, like those trade networks, you don't have to flesh out the trade networks and all that stuff, but just kind of setting them up in a position where it's realistic. Like, you don't want to have a small hamlet or village that has like lavender spices if they're in like a temperate region in like a North American um, kind of climate zone, yet they have like all these exotic spices. Like, it just kind of like is a red flag, I think. But you can have like some societies that are completely self-sufficient, but I think it's good to focus on what the consequences of that are. So, like I said, if they don't have certain resources or spices in that area, then they probably shouldn't have them if they're self-sufficient, don't have any relationships. Also, if they're self-sufficient, it might be interesting to note that they probably have their own currency because they don't have to trade with anyone else. They might have their own languages because they don't have to talk to anyone else, and they might have their own calendar system because they don't really have to tell time to keep business dates and contracts, like anyone who does trade with other societies that are different from them. You could like factor in like different time zones and stuff with calendar systems and trading, but that might be a little bit more complicated and probably won't come up ever in your story. But if it helps you kind of keep everything um, like sound and working in order, then you can do that. That's something that I kind of like to do at some point, giving me ideas for more videos talking about my calendar systems, which is a mess. Anyway, I think it's for example, if you have like a small town that's like a coal mining town, right? And it's known for being a coal mining town, this would lead to the consequence that most people in the town are probably coal miners, and they're probably a working class town, so they probably don't have a lot of high end luxurious things about the town. So it doesn't really make sense for them to have really high end magic items unless they are mining related. Like if they have like swords and it's like there's like hardly a military presence in this small town. Why would they have these advanced magic and like high grade military weapons unless that's just like a common thing in your world overall? But I guess just thinking about that, also thinking about like the miners, this could impact like your how the NPCs kind of talk to your players. They're putting in long hours each day, manual physical work in the mines, and they might just want to get like a beer at the tavern and just kind of like wind down and like talk smack with their friends and stuff like that. Maybe gamble a little bit, but just kind of casual. Whereas if you're doing like a settlement that's known for like high-end computer robotics and like they have like maybe like high-end real estate that overlooks like beautiful vistas. um you got to think about like what are the people who live there doing in order to be able to afford these nice expensive houses without doing a whole lot of like physical work. That kind of starts to develop this like class system of like who's doing the work to build these houses or build these computers or build these robots versus the people who are doing the technical kind of aspect, the white collar aspects of these jobs. And so if the society is on the more advanced side, how is the farming occurring? How is the mining occurring? And so they might outsource all these, and that might be like this is why they're good trade partners with other nations, or they could just be like this, self-sufficient empire, and this particular society, which is probably advanced, probably relies on these kind of smaller societies to do all the like farming and all the lumber, wood cutting, and all the mining to kind of provide these raw materials to people who can manufacture them, who can then further refine them into the computers and all that stuff. So you kind of can start building like a family tree of businesses and stuff like that, and where they're located in the region, etc. I think that it's good to also how do I say this? It's good to also create these zones in your society that are economic based. So like you could create like a mall or a strip mall, and that's where everyone does their shopping, like a farmer's market or grocery store. That's where people do their groceries. Um, can kind of have like more industrialized zones as well. So if it's like a bigger city, maybe they have like a shipping port or an airport or like a train station, maybe like truck stops and warehouses or just caravans or something, depending on the scale of what they're shipping, just to kind of further explain like how this society is making their money. Um, yeah, overall, I think like the economic is just kind of like a very important aspect to really think about. It's kind of like the beating heart of society. So if you have a strong economy, then I think the technology levels are going to increase, and therefore everything from social to political to religious to military, it's all going to receive more funding and be more advanced. Whereas if the economy is not very high, then that also impacts all the other ones and the funding for each one. So I just think economic is good to highlight as an important one to think about. Moving on to religious, I think a good way to think about it is sort of like the education or the morale of the society. So like I think that like religion gives people the sense of community that's a little bit different than just social. Where social, it's kind of just like people kind of talking on the surface. You know, they can talk about the sports in front of them or something. I think that religion sort of provides more philosophical guidance in like a sense of hope and like community on like that, like we are one people sort of level. And I think that, you could there's a lot of ways to approach religion, a lot of nuance to it. They could be like this charitable society that, has all these processes of taking care of sick people and homeless people and refugees, or they could be a very dogmatic and use this religion as a tool to promote a variety of different agendas, such as, conquering lesser societies or, you know, um, just, it can just be a tool, I guess, to use for either the very good or the very bad. Um, and I think that, it doesn't necessarily have to be a religious influence that causes a society to be super charitable or dogmatic, but it just adds an extra sense of a layer of flavor, I guess. I think that like I think I said this earlier, but I think religion can also be replaced with education. So pretty much you could say that, all the kids are learning all these like kind of religious things as they grow up, or they're learning all these philosophical things as they grow up. And pretty much it helps I guess, the young people kind of work towards similar goals, I guess, which kind of keeps them unified and uh, impacts their morale and hope and all that stuff. I think that having religion is interesting though, because you can sort of have all these different pantheons of gods, which are they kind of act like sports teams in a way, where you can have certain gods that are natural rivals with one another, and having these temples located in town, especially if you're playing D&D and you have clerics or something, can really give the player, the protagonist, that kind of extra location to kind of get social information from quests or guidance from a deity or something like that. Um, I think that in my mind, like religion overall helps. I think I said this also, but I think it just helps them just unite under a common demonym, which is pretty much like the natives or inhabitants of a certain area. So like, you could be like people from this area are like this religion, kind of like how like, you might think of like Mormons are from Utah or something, and like Baptists are from the South, and Lutherans, I don't know, Presbyterians from these different locations, kind of like different areas of people being unified by like a common name, I guess, that aren't just people from this settlement, if that makes sense. And then military. I think of military as any form of law enforcement, and its main duty in the story and the world is just to protect the civilians and stand up against invasion, any other criminal activity like that. I think if you're playing D&D, especially, it's good to have some sort of military force, kind of just to ensure that players aren't becoming murder hobos. If that's something that you are don't want in your game, if players are going out killing like shop owners and stuff like that, usually there's a consequence of that. Otherwise, a player could just like rob a shop and take all the stuff. And if you want to have stuff like that, then that's fine. But to keep it more, I guess, realistic, what's preventing those players from doing that, or what's preventing the protagonist in your story from breaking the law? Otherwise, that kind of defeats the purpose of the people in power in the political branch. If there's no one enforcing these laws, then why do they exist, kind of thing. And I think that going back, economy really helps emphasize the power level of this military. So if it's a small economy place, maybe their military just isn't that good. Like if you're in a small village or a hamlet, they probably don't have an organized military. Everyone probably knows everyone. You could say. So really, what's keeping them kind of from breaking the law is this feeling of being ostracized or exiled from the community. If their whole lives are in this small town, they may not want to break the law because then everyone will think of them as a criminal, and then everyone will kind of shun them. They won't have any friends. That could be like an incentive, but that might not work in like a large scale city. um so like also with like a small town that doesn't have a big military, you could think of ideas of like maybe they're more suspicious of outsiders, which is pretty good for like a starting town. The players or the protagonists really have to work their way up and build that rapport with the community before they really get access to certain privileges. And this mentality is just kind of supported that if someone did invade them, they probably could, and that's why they don't want to be invaded, that kind of stuff. Whereas if you have a larger town, let's say like a medium-sized town, maybe they have a mixture of like hired personnel, and maybe if this town reports to a larger city state, like as we said before, maybe there's that one big city state that's really known for its robotics and technology, and there's like a wood cutting kind of town that kind of provides lumber for this, like paper and lumber for this city. And maybe that city, in order to protect their asset of a small town that produces paper, they send some of their higher up, more highly trained personnel from the city to also protect it, in case of any criminal activity or anything like that. So that kind of shows more of a relationship outside of just the economic, that that higher city is protecting its assets. Um, what else do I want to talk about? I think, oh yeah, also I think it's interesting with military to really flesh out your guards, um, or like just any like soldiers in an army, anything like that. I think it's good to have those kind of social interactions with those kind of NPCs because on one hand, well, for starters, if the NPC dies and you've kind of fleshed out these characters, it kind of means a lot more than if the NPC was just this cardboard NPC that didn't really have a personality. It kind of makes the audience less sympathetic or empathetic about that NPC's death. So this is just an extra way to create drama, or just highlight the stakes for the audience. Um, but what I kind of wanted to talk about that, but also kind of go into a little bit about like how to, I guess, flesh out these NPCs. So when you're introducing like a guard character, I think of them often as this very interesting position where most of their day is just probably sitting around watching for bad things to happen. So I think you can play that guard kind of like two ways. Kind of if you want to improv it, one of two ways. One could be this like this guy who or woman who really is like just really bored with their job and really wants action, and so they might be a little bit more jumpy. And if action does occur, or if they're suspicious of action, they might be more eager to act on it. Whereas you could also play this other type of guard, and this could probably be more useful in like sneaking scenarios where the protagonist or whatever, they're trying to sneak past some guards, and the guards could be like easily distracted because nothing's going on, and they've been doing this for hours on hand, and so something that distracts them kind of keeps their uh, just it keeps them from being like super bored and whatnot. So just gives them some sort of entertainment to do well on the shift that they don't really want to be on. Also thinking about how these guards, like, if they're in this position where they might not go home to their families at the end of the day if like the worst case scenario happens. So I think like highlighting these kinds of like potential thoughts that guards have can really bring more life to a story. And also, if you are doing like a sneak adventure and you need an excuse to like help your protagonist, if you're writing a story or players get past them, kind of helping the players do that by giving the guards these kind of distracted personalities can make it believable, and attribute that feeling of verisimilitude, or yeah, just kind of like support that in that way. Anyways, I think I'm talking too long. Overall, I just think that the sperm principle is easy to remember: social, political, economic, religious, military, and it's easy to incorporate it in anything creative that you do, world building wise, from writing novels to designing tabletop campaigns. And once again, I just wanted to shout out Dale Kingsmill's channel one more time. I'll put the link in the description. She makes a lot of great content. I don't know her personally, but she just seems like an awesome person. So if you don't know her, you should go check her out. But yeah, thanks for your time. Have a good one. Later days.